Hello, everyone, and welcome to Spaceflight Now's live coverage of the latest mission from Cape Canaveral Space Force Station. I'm Will Robinson Smith, reporter with Spaceflight Now. So good to have you with us here on a Monday morning. A Monday that is not only the start of the work week for many of us, but also start of a brand new school year for many folks here in Central Florida. So to all of the students, teachers, parents for whom it is back to school day, a special welcome to all of you. We're glad to be sharing part of a busy and important morning. Thanks for settling on in. We're currently T minus 59 minutes and 16 seconds away from, once again, what SpaceX is hoping to be the planned launch of 24 Kuiper satellites into low Earth orbit on behalf of Amazon. Today's launch campaign represents the fifth scheduled attempt to launch this mission, going back to Thursday of last week. The current planned T0 for today is 8:35 a.m. Eastern, 12:35 UTC for those joining around the world. We'll get more into the particulars of the mission as the clock rolls on, but first off, I want to thank the more than 200 of you that are waking up early, and again, considering the state of the morning for a lot of folks, we certainly appreciate those of you who are here in Central Florida for whom it is the first day of school, and yet still carving out a little bit of time to be with us, whether we're on in the background or you're able to watch attentively during this, hopefully, final hour before the KFO2 mission lifts off. If you haven't already, you could do us a big favor just by clicking that like button and sharing the stream, allowing some more folks to find their way into this live launch coverage as the clock rolls on. We're powered by a wonderful channel member community here on YouTube and make these live launch opportunities possible. So thanks to folks like The Rocket Girl, Sulfur for Lunch, Justin Broderick, and many others. Channel membership comes with a number of perks, including discounts at our online shop, which is shop.spaceflightnow.com, access to member-only videos here on YouTube, access to our members-only Discord server, and of course the ability to watch all of our live launch liftoff moments from here in Florida in 4K. It's a beautiful morning here on the Space Coast as the clock continues to count down. We'll get more into the weather in just a moment here. SpaceX does have a 27-minute window once again to launch this mission, so if for whatever reason they need to slide further to the right in order to be prepared, they do have time to do so. We've got photographer Adam Bernstein, who's been out and about busily getting our cameras ready for this latest launch attempt. John Pisani, Michael Caine on dad duty this morning, making sure their kids are off to school. So they'll be joining us a little bit later on in the day as we prepare for the launch, or the planned launch tomorrow, of United Launch Alliance's Vulcan rocket. So plenty of things to prepare for that, which means now is a great time for you to go ahead and follow our photography team with their handles on X. You can find Adam at ABurnNYC. Michael is at MD Caine Jr. John Pisani at John Pisani Photo. Be sure to follow Spaceflight Now simply at Spaceflight Now. We're also on Threads, Blue Sky, and Facebook for those of you who are not on X, formerly Twitter. We're also joined this morning by our friends Pete Carstens with Max Q Productions, as well as Chuck and Jen Briggs with C&J Images, joining us from down on Merritt Island. Last little bit of housekeeping as we get this show going. If you have a comment or question about this mission or other goings on in the realm of space or spaceflight, feel free to use the YouTube Super Chat feature. And not only will you be giving us some interesting things to talk about as we cruise on through the count, but you'll also be supporting what we do here at Spaceflight Now, and that, my friends, is always greatly appreciated. Before we get too far into our launch coverage, of course, this campaign has been highlighted certainly by the impacts of weather both here and afar. Let's go ahead and talk about that for just a beat here, and we'll, of course, revisit it as needed throughout the broadcast. Heading into this launch opportunity, the 45th Weather Squadron gave the best weather outlook that we've seen so far in this 5-day campaign. 75% chance for favorable weather at liftoff, citing concerns this time for just the cumulus cloud and anvil cloud rules. As you can see from this satellite view, thanks to the GOES East satellite, you're seeing not a lot of cloud activity that is directly over the spaceport and not a lot that is directly offshore in our immediate vicinity. Some clouds forming around the coast of Georgia and South Carolina, which may play into meteorologists' forecasting of the booster recovery weather as a moderate risk on a scale of low to moderate to high. That is certainly going to be something that will continue to track throughout the course of this countdown, and so don't be surprised if the T0 once again shuffles off to the right, as SpaceX may need to make some adjustments to account for that downrange weather. The good news is, as you can see across Central Florida, it is largely without rain and fairly cool by Florida standards, so good day for folks to be on the road heading to your various campuses. The booster recovery weather was what ultimately caused the mission to not launch yesterday. SpaceX got within just the last minute and a half of the count before they were planning to launch this Falcon 9 rocket. During Sunday's launch attempt at about the 7.5-minute mark, as SpaceX was talking about its Falcon 9 rocket, it also went live out to its drone ship called a Shortfall of Gravitas, stationed out there in the Atlantic Ocean off the coast of South Carolina. You can see the poor weather in the booster recovery area was, again, the reason that they had to stand down from a launch attempt yesterday, and is continuing to be a watch item for today. If SpaceX does, in fact, need one more bite at the apple tomorrow, the booster recovery weather improves from a moderate risk to a low to moderate risk. But hopefully there's enough good potential with this mission to allow for a launch and a good landing today. The booster that is on tap is especially important, though, to SpaceX, since as we take a closer look at this right here, you'll note that there is not the typical SpaceX lettering and a little more hardware than you might be used to seeing on a Falcon first stage. And that's because this booster is going to be used as the center of a Falcon Heavy tricore boost or a tricore rocket. That'll eventually fly what we believe will be the Griffin 1 mission on behalf of Pittsburgh-based Astrobotic, sending their larger lander, a robotic lander, to the surface of the moon, launching at year's end. Before it flies as a Falcon Heavy center, though, SpaceX decided to fly it first as a single-stick Falcon 9 so that it gets some flight heritage. We don't know explicitly if that's creating more caution with this particular mission as compared to others that we've seen in recent months. But that certainly could be the reason why they're being especially cautious when it comes to the weather and the booster recovery weather at that, since they don't want to risk losing such an important part of their future plans. Time now is currently T-minus 47 minutes, 41 seconds and counting to the planned liftoff of this mission. With just about 10 minutes to go before SpaceX makes its first call on the start of prop load, let's go ahead and talk about the countdown timeline. The milestones that we're anticipating ahead of a good launch of a Falcon 9. As mentioned, T-minus 38 minutes is when the SpaceX launch director will make the call on the start of prop load. Once that go-ahead is given, fueling begins at the T-minus 35 minutes with RP-1, which is a rocket-grade kerosene, flowing on board to the rocket's first and second stages. Meanwhile, liquid oxygen will start to flow on board the Falcon 9's first stage. Half an hour before liftoff, cryogenic helium is loaded onto the pressure vessels for the first stage. Same will be true on the second stage a few minutes afterwards. And that helium is important, of course, because it's used to pressurize the main propellant tanks during flight. 23 minutes out, the second stage RP-1 tank is full. And at T-minus 20 minutes and 50 seconds, we'll see the strong back chill down get underway. This is the thermal conditioning process ahead of loading liquid oxygen on board the rocket's upper stage. Before we get to that point, though, we'll see the so-called big vent, a good visual marker that begins here at pad 40 at the Cape, T-minus 20 minutes and 20 seconds, lasting roughly 4 minutes in duration. Once that is done and dusted, second stage LOX load begins at the 16-minute mark. Moving right along, the engine chill of the 9 Merlin 1D engines will begin at the T-minus 7-minute point in time. That's when SpaceX will flow a small amount of liquid oxygen through the plumbing and turbo pumps, and help protect those engines from the risk of thermal shock and damage during startup. 6 minutes before flight, the first stage kerosene tank is full. Then at T-minus 4.5 minutes, we'll see the strong back begin to move away from the Falcon 9. That process starts with the pressurization of the tanks connected to the strong back. And then we'll see the clamp arms open up just beneath the payload fairings. And then the entire structure will recline a few degrees away from the Falcon 9 rocket. And it stays in that position until liftoff. Then at that point, it'll pull back in a much more rapid fashion to clear the way for the vertical climb of that Falcon 9. 3 minutes before takeoff, the first stage liquid oxygen tank is full. Same is true on the second stage about a minute afterwards. at which point the Falcon 9 will be fully loaded with 1 million pounds of propellant. In the final 60 seconds, as the Falcon 9 enters its automated startup, control of the countdown is handed over from the ground sequencer to the Falcon 9's onboard flight computers, and the propellant tanks are brought up to flight pressure. SpaceX launch director will give their go for launch 45 seconds before takeoff. The engine ignition command is issued at T-minus 3 seconds, and if all 9 Merlin engines are healthy and ignite as expected, and the weather hopefully cooperates, we'll see the liftoff of the Falcon 9 rocket at T0, currently scheduled for 8:35 a.m. Eastern, 12:35 UTC, or in T-minus 44 minutes and counting. Time now, T-minus 42 minutes, 18 seconds, and counting. Just to address some of the chatter in the live chat regarding if this is the 4th attempt, the 5th attempt, what are we on today, what does it all mean? SpaceX scheduled this launch now for a 5th time. Those of you perhaps counting the number of times we've seen them try to tank the rocket, and we've seen live streams from us here at Spaceflight Now. There have only been 4 that we've actually started, but on Friday they did schedule the launch. However, before they really got into it, that launch was then punted to Saturday. They lowered the Falcon 9 at the pad after the Thursday launch attempt to address an issue with the vehicle, which has to date not been detailed by SpaceX, but then they brought the Falcon 9 back up into the vertical launch position on Friday, but not with enough time to make a run at it. So they stood down from a launch attempt on Friday that was scheduled on Thursday after the scrub, and then pivoted to Saturday. So here we are on the 5th scheduled day that SpaceX has planned to launch this mission, and hopefully the 5th time will be the charm. And yes, our microphones are picking up quite a bit of bug and bird activity, so apologies to those of you who are listening on high-fidelity headphones. May feel like there's something flying by your ear, which thankfully is not the case, but just speaks to the quality that we're trying to bring to you as part of our launch coverage experience here at Spaceflight Now. Make you really feel like you're right here with us at the Kennedy Space Center press site. Bugs and all. Currently T-minus 39 minutes, 38 seconds and counting. We are less than 2 minutes away from when the SpaceX launch director should be making the call on the start of prop load today. Again, SpaceX does have a 27-minute window that opens at 8:35 a.m. Eastern, so they do have a little bit of latitude in order to adjust that T0 liftoff time if it is deemed necessary. T-minus 38 minutes and counting. Keeping our eye on the SpaceX timeline to see if they make any adjustments to the current T0, but the clock appears to be rolling on at this point in the countdown. If that continues to be the case, we're less than 3 minutes away from the start of fueling for this Falcon 9 rocket. T-minus 35 minutes, 26 seconds and counting. The clock continues to move forward, which means we are potentially just about 15 seconds away from the start of fueling for this Falcon 9 rocket. Weather continues to be quite good here at the press site. As we are now 35 minutes and counting, we should be at the start of fueling, but wanted to bring back up the GOES East radar view or satellite view of the southeastern United States. You see those clouds that are bubbling up off the coast of Myrtle Beach. That's right about the area where the drone ship, a Shortfall of Gravitas, is based. It's about 180 or so miles off the coast of South Carolina due southeast. So right about that nexus of that cloud activity appears to be not so bad that SpaceX, it seems, is getting into its fueling campaign and will make a run at this at the opening of the window as opposed to pushing later and later. Of course, traffic never stops here at pad 40, so things continue to back up here as other missions are eagerly awaiting their flights. Next launch from pad 40 now looking at August 13th at the earliest for the launch of Starlink 10-20. Now that we are in the start of fueling, as it appears, we're going to be watching for those signs of tanking, or an update from SpaceX would also be most welcome. Once again, we are looking just above, if you see at the bottom, at the very, very bottom of your screen, where the trees have a little bit of a gap and you can see one of those carbon fiber landing legs, the sort of black, almost triangle structure, sort of an isosceles triangle here. A little bit above that, you see those rectangles that'll help attach to the side boosters for a future Falcon Heavy flight. Just above that point in the rocket is where we'll start to see a frost line form, or as much as we can see with all this backlighting. I think more of the telltale sign today will be the vapor that forms as the super cold densified liquid oxygen flows on board the booster, meets the considerably warmer, more humid Florida air to create that vapor. That'll be a good visual sign that LOX is flowing onto these tanks, or onto this tank, I should say. So we approach the 32-minute mark. It does appear that we're starting to see that vapor I was just mentioning. If you look just in front of the rocket, you can see it catch the light of the sun. Actually, is a little bit better with this backlighting, all things considered, because the sun is able to reflect off of that LOX vapor, give us our good visual cue that SpaceX is, in fact, fueling this Falcon 9 rocket, which means no more adjustments to the T0 today, and SpaceX is going to make a run for it, or run at it, at the top of this launch window. If you're just now joining us, it is just a little past the top of the hour here on the East Coast, about 5 past 8 a.m. 29 minutes remaining on the clock as SpaceX is now in the motion of fueling its Falcon 9 rocket. They're at Cape Canaveral Space Force Station in Space Launch Complex 40. With fueling underway, SpaceX is locked into a launch attempt at the opening of the window. 8:35 a.m. Eastern, 12:35 UTC for its launch attempt, with 24 of Amazon's Project Kuiper satellites on board. Also, past the half-hour mark before liftoff, we're also at the point where SpaceX is now loading cryogenic helium onto the pressure vessels for the Falcon 9's first stage. The same will be true on the second stage in just a couple of minutes. Taking a look at our live chat, want to thank the more than 1,200 of you who are watching along with us live. If you haven't already, you could do us a big favor just by clicking that like button and sharing the stream, allowing some more folks to find their way into this live launch coverage. Also, I see channel member and moderator Rick Donner has joined the festivities. Good to see you this morning, Rick. If you do see any of our other moderators as well join into the live chat, be sure to give them a big old Spaceflight Now hello. As a quick reminder for our live chat rules, we ask that you converse in English so that Rick and the other mods can respond as appropriate, that you don't delve into overt politics and religion. Hold off on using all caps. An emoji or two is fine in your message, but if you start creating blocks of emoji text, that will also get your message blocked as it tends to clog up the chat. But again, a few emojis in a message is fine. Most importantly, though, we ask that you treat each other with the kindness and respect that you yourself would like to be treated. About 26.5 minutes remaining on the clock. We've got a few minutes ahead before the start of the so-called big vent. So let's take a beat and talk about where this rocket is going to be flying once it does leave the pad. Talk a little trajectory, shall we? Falcon 9 flying this morning will lift off from Space Launch Complex 40 and head off in a northeasterly trajectory, similar to what we saw not too long ago with the launch of NASA's Crew 11 mission on another SpaceX rocket. That, of course, lifting off from Pad 39A. After beginning its climb uphill at the point of stage separation, the first stage booster, 1091, will target a landing on the drone ship called a shortfall of gravitas. If this is successful, this would mark the 120th good landing on that particular drone ship and the 486th booster landing to date. This may be the first booster landing for this particular first stage, but SpaceX, of course, is working to certify its fleet to be capable of launching up to 40 times each. And that is also the case with the payload fairings, which SpaceX will also work to recover with this particular mission. Following atmospheric reentry, the fairing halves will each splash down into the waters of the Atlantic Ocean under the support of steerable parachutes. Once down in the water, they will be brought aboard one of SpaceX's recovery vessels and then brought through Port Canaveral here in Florida. Then they're off to SpaceX's Hangar X site on Roberts Road here at the Kennedy Space Center, where they will be examined, refurbished, and turned around for future missions. Time now T-minus 23 minutes, 25 seconds and counting. The payload on board today's Falcon flight, of course, is, as we've discussed before, a batch of 24 of Amazon's Project Kuiper broadband internet satellites. This photo of them was taken now a week ago today, when the fairing halves encapsulating those satellites rolled out of Amazon's own payload processing facility at Space Florida's Launch and Landing Facility, formerly the Shuttle Landing Facility here at the Kennedy Space Center. Those fairing halves delivered out to Pad 40, of course, to be integrated onto the Falcon 9 rocket you see standing there live in the box on the right-hand side of your screen. The fairing half on the right is number 155, which is also familiar to Amazon since it flew on the first mission carrying Kuiper satellites on a SpaceX rocket. It's flying for a 28th time with this mission, and the fairing half on the left is flying for a 5th time once it does head off the pad. Here's another photo of those satellites heading out to the road and then making their way over to State Road 3 to begin their journey out to Pad 40. As we just mentioned, this is the second time that SpaceX is deploying Kuiper satellites on behalf of Amazon. As we, I guess, didn't see last time, we also will not see a live deployment of these Kuiper satellites at the request of Amazon. They are choosing, for their own reasons, to keep these satellites a bit of a mystery, sharing instead this image of the deployment mechanism that was used to release the Kuiper satellites from the KF-01 mission. Amazon bought one more Falcon 9 rocket that is set to launch the Kuiper satellites. SpaceX was the last launch provider added to the roster of more than 80 rockets bought by Amazon to send its Kuiper constellation into low Earth orbit. That was at the insistence of investors that SpaceX be added to the mix. Speaking of the mix, where we are right now is just about 20 seconds away from the start of the big vent there at the pad. SpaceX chills the feed lines ahead of second stage liquid oxygen load. And there you see the big vent right on time as SpaceX is preparing to load locks on the second stage in just about 4 minutes from now. T-minus 18 minutes and counting. Got just about a minute and a half left on this vent here. As the countdown continues to progress to the opening of today's launch window, I want to thank the nearly 2,000 of you who are watching along with us live. If you haven't already, you could do us a big favor just by clicking that like button and sharing the stream to allow some more folks to find their way into this live launch coverage. Also would love to see where folks are joining us from today. Go ahead and sound off in the live chat. As we've got, of course, plenty of folks here in Florida. As usual, Fort Pierce. Scott is checking in from Titusville. Moon Bunny joining us from down in Palm Bay. There we go. We've got California, Baltimore, Maryland, Michigan, Texas, Zurich, Switzerland. Fantastic. Just about 10 seconds left on this big vent here. I want to thank channel member Chuck Close for a very generous $25 super chat. Really appreciate that, Chuck. Good to see you this morning. I hope you're doing well, sir. With that venting now all wrapped up, SpaceX is now preparing to load liquid oxygen on the rocket's second stage, set to begin in the next about 15 seconds. That loudspeaker announcement you may have just heard in the broadcast was what typically in the summer months is the essentially daily reminder that we are reaching or have reached what is considered to be a high enough heat level that it merits a warning on the heat stress index, reminding folks, especially those that are doing lots of physical labor, to drink plenty of water, take breaks as needed in order to avoid heat-related illnesses. Right now it's just about 80 degrees here at the Cape with a heat index of 84. Looks like we're going to top out at about 90 degrees straight up Fahrenheit. So warm day today, but looks like we're going to peak at about 91 degrees from Tuesday through Friday. So very much still summer here on the Space Coast, despite the fact that school is now back in session. As SpaceX is now 13.5 minutes away from launching its Falcon 9 rocket, let's go ahead and take a beat and talk about SpaceX's workhorse vehicle, the Falcon 9, which stands at 70 meters or 229 feet in height. Majority of that, of course, is made up by the rocket's first stage. Once again, this is the booster with the tail number 1091 in the SpaceX fleet, which will be flying for just its first time. The booster burns a combination of liquid oxygen and RP1, which is a rocket-grade kerosene, and produces 1.7 million pounds of thrust at liftoff. Around the engine section are those black carbon fiber landing legs that will be used to land the first stage on the drone ship. Hopefully, if the launch goes off today, just read the instruction. Or excuse me, a short fall of gravitas is on tap today. Above the first stage is the inner stage. This is a composite structure consisting of an aluminum honeycomb core, which is surrounded by carbon fiber. In that image on the right-hand side of your screen, you can see the deployable hypersonic grid fins. These are titanium winglets that provide stability and steering for the Falcon 9 as it comes back through the atmosphere. Tail first like a big old dart heading towards that drone ship I just mentioned. At the top of the inner stage are 3 mechanical latches that attach the rocket's second stage. And at first stage main engine cutoff, high-pressure helium is used to release those latches, and 4 pneumatic pushers ensure a clean separation. Also, the second stage engine nozzle is housed safely inside the inner stage adapter until that point of separation. Speaking of the second stage, the Falcon 9 rocket is also powered by a combination of liquid oxygen and RP1. It features a single modified Merlin engine referred to as a Merlin vacuum engine or an MVAC engine, hence the name. This engine produces more than 220,500 pounds of thrust in the vacuum of space. Following the deployment of the Kuiper satellites, there will be one final deorbit burn to help drive it back into the atmosphere, where it's designed to burn up and help eliminate the risk for creating space debris on this mission. Finally, at the top of the Falcon 9 stack are the payload fairings, currently encapsulating the 24 Kuiper satellites. The fairings are made up of a carbon composite material and stand 13.1 meters or 43 feet in height, and are 5.2 meters or 17.1 feet in diameter. At the point of fairing separation, the fairing halves will come back through the atmosphere and then splash down in the waters of the Atlantic Ocean under the support of steerable parachutes. Once down in the water, they will be brought aboard a SpaceX recovery vessel and then brought back through Port Canaveral and then onto Hangar X for refurbishment and preparation for their next venture to space. Speaking of our next venture to space, should be coming up here in just about 10 minutes, as SpaceX is hopefully going to be able to launch this Falcon 9 rocket, weather permitting. Just about 8.5 minutes remaining on the clock. We're now getting pad level views of the Falcon 9 at Space Launch Complex 40. In just about a minute, SpaceX will start to flow liquid oxygen through the plumbing and turbopumps The good news is the weather outlook per the SpaceX commentator has improved from what the 45th Weather Squadron's forecast of 75% chance for favorable weather. That is now improved to today's outlook with a 90% chance of good weather. One of the, of course, watch items going into this launch has been the booster recovery weather. About 180 miles southeast from Myrtle Beach in South Carolina. Confirmation of engine chill now underway. SpaceX flows that liquid oxygen through the plumbing and turbo pumps through the engines at the base of the booster to protect them from the risk of thermal shock and damage during startup. Here's a live view of a shortfall of gravitas out in the Atlantic. The amount of clouds looks significantly better than the video we showed to you at the beginning of the broadcast, so hopefully things are moving along in a fashion that will continue to allow SpaceX to get through the full count, and we'll see a good liftoff here in less than 6.5 minutes from now. Confirmation of stage 1 RP1 loading wrapping up. With 5.5 minutes to go, this mission today represents the 4th flight for the Project Kuiper constellation. The first 2 were on board United Launch Alliance Atlas V rockets, and the third was on the first of 3 planned flights using a SpaceX Falcon 9. With these first 3 missions, Amazon now has 78 satellites in low Earth orbit. The planned first-generation constellation will consist of more than 3,200 in total. Tanks are now pressurizing for the retraction of the strong back. Those clamp arms around the upper stage, just beneath the payload fairings, will open up. The upper stage will then recline, or excuse me, the transporter erector will recline away from the upper stage and the rest of the Falcon 9 rocket shortly thereafter. Watching for the opening of those clamp arms. You see one in the bottom third of your screen. Four minutes and counting. You'll notice there's a slight discrepancy between our countdown clock and what you're seeing from SpaceX. The reason for that is our clock is in real time, SpaceX coming in on just a slight delay. So as long as we've got ground level tracking views of the rocket, we will continue to make our callouts based off of real-time events. Once we're solely reliant on onboard camera views, then we'll use SpaceX's timeline, just a couple seconds off. For those who did not hear me say it earlier in the broadcast, at Amazon's request, SpaceX is not going to be providing any upper stage views after stage separation. So we won't see a live deployment of these Kuiper satellites, nor the deployment of the payload fairings from the onboard camera views. Confirmation of stage 1 LOX load being complete. We are now awaiting a similar call on the second stage, which should be coming up at just about the T-minus 2-minute mark. Confirmation of stage 2 liquid oxygen load being complete. Coming up next will be the ground gas closeouts as SpaceX releases liquid oxygen from the feed lines. That's the additional venting that you're seeing at the pad now. SpaceX commentator notes that weather remains a go item for today's launch, so with a minute and a half remaining, we're coming up on the final minute before liftoff.
Falcon 9 is in startup.
With that call, we are now just awaiting the SpaceX launch director to hear those words we've been waiting for them to say for so long, it feels like. Let's listen in.
The launch director is go for launch.
Music to my ears. Just about 30 seconds now remaining before the liftoff of this Falcon 9 rocket on its 5th scheduled launch attempt. 30 seconds and counting. "15 seconds. And here we go in 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Engine ignition and liftoff. Liftoff of this Falcon 9 rocket on the KF-02 flight. The Falcon 9 has cleared the towers. And some nice shot callers there as the Falcon 9 is a little more than a minute into flight, passing through max Q now. Point of greatest aerodynamic pressure on the vehicle. The engine's throttling up now. The upper stage engine will next be thermally conditioned ahead of its first ignition. Milestone known as MVAC chill.
MVAC chill has started.
Good call on MVAC chill. We're now awaiting a few events to happen in fairly rapid succession. We'll see first stage main engine cutoff, or MECO, at about T plus 2 minutes and 25 seconds. That'll be followed by stage separation a few seconds afterwards, and then the ignition of that Merlin vacuum engine at about T plus 2 minutes and 37 seconds. The fairing halves will be jettisoned at about 3.5 minutes into the mission. However, once again, at Amazon's request, we will not see onboard camera views of fairing separation. We should be able to see them from the ground, though. Let's listen in for those trio of events, starting with Miko.
Main engine cutoff.
Stage separation confirmed.
And back ignition.
All good callouts, good milestones. Again, at Amazon's request, we are not going to be seeing fairing separation from the onboard cameras. Should happen, though, in about 30 seconds. Given the lighting, though, we've got a nice view from our tracking cameras of both the first and second stages. The booster is what you're seeing on the left-hand side of your screen, the upper stage on the right. Those puffs you're seeing are the cold gas thrusters as SpaceX adjusts the attitude and positioning of the booster, beginning to make its way towards the drone ship, a short fall of gravitas. Now 3.5 minutes into flight. There go the payload fairings.
Fairing separation confirmed.
Good confirmation by SpaceX. Again, with Amazon's insistence, they are not showing those onboard camera views of the Kuiper satellites. Keeping an eye with our tracking cameras on the Falcon first stage booster as long as we can. Can actually still see glints of those fairing halves on the left-hand side of Pete's tracking camera. Booster is that white dot floating in the middle of the screen. Falcon booster looks like it's going to top out at about 114 kilometers in altitude. You can see the telemetry from the first and second stages in the corners of the SpaceX stream box on the right-hand side of your screen. Now making its descent towards the drone ship. The next milestone coming up will be the start of the entry burn, beginning at about 6 minutes into flight. This will use 3 of the 9 Merlin engines at the base of the booster to begin to dramatically slow that vehicle down. Some nice Atlantic views from the booster's perspective. Given that Pete still got a bead on the Falcon first stage booster, we should see a little bit of a glow as the entry burn is set to begin in roughly 30 seconds. It's tricky tracking given the lighting conditions today, so Pete is doing an excellent job with this right now.
Stage 1, entry burn startup.
Good start for the beginning of the entry burn. A little bit of clouds got between us and the rocket from the ground perspective. This burn lasts less than 30 seconds.
Stage 1, entry burn shutdown.
Confirmation that both the first and second stages are still on a nominal trajectory. We're coming up on the landing burn now, which will happen at about T+7 minutes and 42 seconds. The single center engine on the Falcon booster will reignite and cushion the landing of B-1091. Also, the second stage flight termination system has been saved. No longer needed at this stage in flight. Less than 30 seconds away from the start of the landing burn.
A very cool view of the first stage entering back into Earth's atmosphere.
Stage 1, landing burn.
Stage 2 is in terminal guidance.
Stage 1, landing leg deploy. Stage 1, landing confirmed.
And for the first time, B-1091 making its first trip to space and back, touching down on the drone ship, a short fall of gravitas. Confirmation for MVAC shutdown.
Nominal orbit insertion.
And a good confirmation of a good orbit with the upper stage. With Amazon not being willing to provide upper stage views of its Kuiper satellites, we will not see deployment or any other views at this point. Taking a look inside Mission Control at SpaceX facilities in Hawthorne, California, their former headquarters. The Kuiper satellites will be deployed beginning at about T plus 56 minutes and 18 seconds post liftoff, with deployment being complete at T plus 1 hour and 3 minutes 58 seconds post liftoff. Well, after 5 scheduled attempts, SpaceX manages to finally clear Pad 40 with a good launch and landing of the first stage booster. We're going to go ahead and turn momentarily to our mission stats as they currently stand. But as a reminder, now's a good time to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications, since given all the delays with this mission, this is now turned into a double launch day as scheduled, with SpaceX aiming to launch its Starlink 17-4 flight from Vandenberg Space Force Base in Southern California this evening. We'll have live coverage beginning about 30 minutes ahead of liftoff. The flight of that Falcon 9 set to launch at 7:05 p.m. Pacific, 10:05 p.m. Eastern, 02:05 UTC. And then, of course, coming up tomorrow, we've got another busy launch day with the flights scheduled for Vulcan, making its first national security debut mission, launching the USSF 106 mission, and Ariane 6 lifting off from Kourou in French Guiana with a dual flight, or dual mission, I should say, on behalf of EUMETSAT and the European Commission. We'll have live launch coverage on all these missions, and we hope to see you back here when we start that coverage then. In the meantime, though, I want to thank a couple folks for their support with today's live launch coverage. If I can get the chat to work. There we go. Want to thank Rocket Lady Elizabeth for a $5 super chat. Thank you, Elizabeth. Good to see you today. Also want to thank Bridget Schult for gifting a Spaceflight Now membership, as well as to Gunnar S for gifting 5. Both wonderful members of our community here. And thanks to your generosity for growing that community by a few more folks. So to our 6 newest gifted members, welcome aboard. We're glad to have you with us. And if you haven't already, be sure to thank Bridget and Gunnar in the live chat. And we hope you decide to stick around with channel membership. We're getting our launch replays for you ready, so stand by as those are prepared. Going to go ahead and turn to our mission stats here as they now currently stand. With a good liftoff and landing of B-1091, that marked its first trip to space and back. Today was also SpaceX's 514th Falcon 9 launch to date, the 97th of the year so far, which means they've gone now one past the total number of launches accrued across all of 2023. Since this was not a booster reflight, the reflight number stays at 450. Today was SpaceX's 154th orbital launch within the last 365 days. This was the 271st orbital launch from Pad 40 and the 326th overall orbital launch from this pad as well. Here's where the bar chart now currently stands. Moving on to some recovery stats. This was the 120th good landing on the drone ship called a shortfall of gravitas. That marked the 394th drone ship landing for SpaceX and the 486th booster landing to date. Finally, with some industry stats, this was the 67th launch from Florida so far this year, the 102nd orbital launch from U.S. soil, the 112th launch from a U.S. rocket company, and the 174th orbital launch attempt from around the globe. With 4 orbital failures on the year so far, here is where our pie chart now currently stands. And we also have those replays ready for you. So let's go ahead and get things started with the fixed view from the press site, courtesy of our Adam Bernstein. Moving on to the wide camera here. See James Bleakney was able to catch the flight of this Falcon 9 rocket from all the way over at Walt Disney World in Central Florida, which is very cool. Moving on to the turn basin shot. as we continue to watch this tracking view from Chuck and Jen Briggs' perspective down on Merritt Island. Want to thank Diane for a $10 super chat. Thank you, Diane, who says thank you to all. Sulfur for Lunch, also marking 12 months with us as a mission specialist level member. It says 12 months down, hopefully many more to come. We appreciate you being here with us now for a full year, Sulfur. Looking forward to the future as well. Also want to welcome in new channel members Rusted Woods and KH, joining us with membership at the pad leader level. Welcome into the both of you. I think welcome back to KH. We're glad to have you both with us. And we'll finish things off with a look at Adam's tracker here at the press site. And with that, we're going to go ahead and wrap up our live coverage for the final time. This has been our live coverage of the KF-02 launch campaign. One more reminder, though, there is another SpaceX Falcon 9 rocket getting ready to lift off later on today over on the West Coast with the 17-4 Starlink mission, sending up a batch of 24 Starlink satellites into low Earth orbit, into a polar orbit. We'll have live coverage beginning about half an hour before that planned liftoff, which currently is targeting 7:05 p.m. Pacific, 10:05 Eastern, 02:05 UTC. We're also keeping tabs on preparation for the upcoming Vulcan rocket launch set to take flight tomorrow evening, with a window opening up a minute before 8 p.m. Eastern, 23:59 UTC. Want to thank our photography team for having been out here now for multiple attempts. So big thanks to Adam, to Michael, and John for all their hard work in getting all the attempts of this launch covered from tip to tail. Thanks to our friends Pete Carstens with Max Q Productions. To our moderator Rick Donner, who's been in the chat with us today, and for all of the other moderators who have been in and out of the chats for the previous launch attempts as well. I want to thank our Spaceflight Now editor, Stephen Young, for running the technical operations of today's broadcast. Most importantly, thanks to you for wherever you've been watching from. Certainly appreciate your time and attention with these missions, and we couldn't do this coverage without you. For all of us here at Spaceflight Now, I'm Will Robinson Smith. Remember, be good to yourselves, be good to others, and we will see you next time, folks. And until then, bye-bye.